Hey, it's Matthew again. Sorry, last time I was recording, my iPad actually ran out of space, so I was actually recording, or not recording for a long time, and I just kept talking. So I've already gone through all of this, but I'm gonna pick up where I left off. So this will be part 2 of the introduction of my tarot story, I guess. So I was blown away by the images of the major arcana and their symbolism and how unique they were and how I could sort of connect with them. Now, I was talking about my first deck to recap for you, in case you're just joining. The Tarot of the Witches was my first deck. And it's one of those decks that some people love, some people hate it. A lot of people hate it. But I love the deck because I have sort of a nostalgic feeling towards it. But the deck is well known for being in the James Bond movie, Live and Let Die. And one of the cards that played a prominent scene, or played a prominent part in the movie, was the Lovers. So here's the Lovers. Now, I'm just going to flip through some cards as I tell you the story of this deck. When I first started using this deck, I was very intimidated by the pip cards because they were just number cards like that. So I didn't really connect with that. I had no knowledge of numerology, and I thought there was no way I was ever going to be able to memorize all of those. So I used this deck for about 6 months or so before I bought my second deck. And during the course of that 6 months, I only used the major arcana. And it was funny because the backings of the decks, which have this white and red pattern, I used the majors so much that I carried them around with me everywhere I went. I would lay them out on the table and I'd leave them there, and I was playing with them constantly, all the time. So the edges of them browned, which I trimmed mine. Originally they have white borders like the one seen on the back with the Emperor. But the major arcana borders were so dirty and grimy from me using them all the time. Not that I was not washing my hands or not being cleanly or being careless with my cards. It's just over time cards wear and you use them, and I was using them a lot. And yeah, so whenever I would flip over to the back with the entire 78 card deck, I could pick out each of the major arcana cards, and I just couldn't use it anymore until I trimmed this deck, either, like I said in the last video, either earlier this year or sometime last year. And I love this Devil card. It's one of my favorite Devil cards. I don't know why. I just love that one. Here's Hanged Man, the Magician, and Death. Right there. And so yeah, I began checking out books at the library. Now this was at a time in my life where I did not have access to the internet. I was just a kid. I couldn't afford all kind of tarot card books all the time. So I went to the library a lot, and every time I would check out a book, I kept seeing images of pips that had full pictures in them. And I said, well, that would be great. That would really help me be able to utilize the full deck. And so I decided that eventually one day I was going to get a pip deck. Probably the Rider-Waite deck would probably be the one that I would go for. But, oh yeah, I wanted to show you guys how whenever I was learning the major arcana, this book, the book that comes with the set, has a large picture of the card, which here's the Hermit, which the Hermit, for those of you who don't know, is my personal favorite card. Not particularly in this deck That's not what I'm talking about. I mean just like in general. I love the Hermit. But I think this is an interesting hermit. Oh, he has his book with that little bird and his plate of food that's steaming. He's writing and he's so isolated on a little island. It's kind of interesting. But you can see here, when they explain the meanings, it's all key words. It's, which whenever I was reading, I had a difficult time. I was like, which one is it? You know, what do I choose? How do I know? What does it mean? And I knew that was where the intuition part is supposed to kick in. But at that time, I felt like this deck was a little too difficult for me. So eventually, my mother and I finally discovered Barnes & Nobles in the city, about 40 minutes away from my house. And when we went to Barnes & Nobles, it was still 2003. It was probably more in the summer, so this is about 6-7 months later. And sometime early in the summer, I was really big into Lord of the Rings at the time. Now, this was 2003, and I am a huge Lord of the Rings fan. And I think Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite things that has ever even happened in my life. Those movies, the books. I love Lord of the Rings. I'm obsessed. But so I saw at Barnes & Noble's the Lord of the Rings Tarot. And I begged my mom for this. I said, Mom, let me get it. It's Lord of the Rings. And she said, but you already have a tarot deck, Matthew. I'm like, I know, but you don't understand. This is different. It's Lord of the Rings. And Barnes & Noble's back then had a really cool thing where it was like this setup on the shelf where it had like binder rings with cards that had holes on the top, and you could flip through them to see. So I could actually look at these cards before I bought them, which was really neat because this was one of the ones that was on the little ringlet thing that you can flip through. And yeah, so I saw it and I said, oh, they have images on the pips. So the Lord of the Rings deck, which this is the backing, so it is reversible. Lord of the Rings deck is very beautiful. As you can see, the pips are pictured. So you can see 2 of Cups. You can tell that it's a bit of a romantic card. Here's the 3. Let me go back to the beginning. I think I lost the order. But, I had them in order in my previous recording of this video because I did talk for a while without noticing that the camera was not recording, and now I'm going to be paranoid that it's not recording again. Well, I lost the Fool. He was somewhere. Oh, here he is. So here's the Fool. That's Gollum with the Precious right there. So that's cool. And then you have, of course, Gandalf as the Magician. The Lady Eowyn. So this was a cool deck because I love Lord of the Rings, and my 13-year-old self was not an expert at tarot, but I was sort of a little Lord of the Rings Tolkien junior scholar, I guess you can say. So it really helped me sort of connect stories with the pip cards. But during the summer, I also bought my very first tarot book, which I should have brought with me to put in this video. But it was The Complete Guide to Tarot by Eden Gray, I believe. And in Eden Gray's book, along with many of the library books that I used, the images that I saw were of the Rider-Waite. And so I saw the Rider-Waite, it was there, and I said, Mom, I know I bought 2 tarot decks already this year, but this is like the most popular one, and I promise this is the last one, I promise. Yeah. So in I think it was July of 2003, still 13 years old, I got the Rider Tarot deck, which we all know and call the Rider-Waite Tarot deck or the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which is in respect to Pixie, aka Pamela Coleman Smith, who is the illustrator of the deck and whose signature can be seen on all of the cards in the bottom corners. Right here, that's her little PCS symbol right there. So, yes, I got, in the same year that I got my first tarot deck, I got the Lord of the Rings Tarot, and then I got the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which for me was very, the edition I got is probably a late 90s edition. It has the font at the bottom. It doesn't have Pamela Coleman Smith's original handwriting. It has a digital font. The gloss is not as bad as the editions that they release now. It's pretty glossy, but the ones that are out now are really glossy. But this deck was the one that I learned everything. This exact deck in my hands is the deck I've been having since I was 13 years old. We've been through so much together, and it's my baby. It's my trusty deck, I guess you can say. Now, over the years, I have bought several Rider-Waite-Smith editions, including the original Rider-Waite, which I bought a year ago, because I was using this deck. I've been using this deck for years. Now, mind you, this wasn't the last deck that I bought until recently, because I've been on a collecting spree recently, and now I have over 24 decks. But I had bought a couple others, which I'll probably show you one day. In like 2004, 2005, I had bought a couple more decks, but this was the one that I used for over 10 years primarily. And it wasn't until about 2-3 years ago, excuse me, that I really started collecting other decks. So this was my only Rider-Waite-Smith deck that I had for a long time, and oh, I love the Nine of Pentacles. It's one of my favorite cards. Look at that snail. I love it. Love Nine of Pentacles. I saw her. I had to show her off. So, since then, a year ago, I got the original Rider-Waite deck because I wanted something that looked older, which the original Rider-Waite, which it's called the original, but it's actually a facsimile edition. This deck originates from 1910. So this edition was supposed to be a very antiqued looking one. Not this one. I'm talking about the original edition that I bought last year. Excuse me. That edition is supposed to make it look antique, to make it look older, and I really like that. That was my goal. I wanted to get a very old-looking deck, and I know they have the Centennial edition as well, which is beautiful, but I don't have it yet. It's probably one of the only editions that I don't have, because I have the Giant, I have the Radiant, which I've trimmed. I have the Universal Waite. I have a German edition of that one because German is my second language. And I wanted a German Rider-Waite deck, but I figure, well, I already have all these other versions, so let's get the Universal, because the Universal was a version that I didn't have, and it's very popular, so I have a German version of that. And, excuse me, that might be all. I think so. I think I covered them all. And I have several clones of other different decks that are clones, like Hanson Roberts and that kind of stuff. Oh, Morgan Greer, that's another one of my favorites. But this was always the primary one that I was working with. And you don't need me to explain this to you at all. If you're watching this video, you probably are more familiar with this deck. You're probably sick of seeing this deck. But this is this physical deck in my hands that I'm holding is the one that I was using whenever I was 13. And it's very special to me. I don't really believe in leaving your aura or your vibration on an item, but if I had to, if there was one thing that would make me change my mind, it would probably be this deck. Because this deck and I have been through so much, and I just feel like when I use my original Rider-Waite, I feel like I'm betraying this deck. Like, I'll use the original Rider-Waite and it feels good. Yeah, I like it, but this deck always calls me, or I have to touch it and use it at least once a week. But lately, in the past couple weeks, I've been touching it every day to kind of reconnect with it, because I've been using the original Rider-Waite for a while, and I'm just like, but I really wanted to go back to that deck that's been with me from the beginning, because even though the Tarot of the Witches was my first deck, and I had the Lord of the Rings deck after, which I only got to collect. I don't really do readings with the Lord of the Rings deck. This deck was when I started to learn the Minor Arcana, and this is when I finally took that step from being sort of amateurish to truly evolving in my study of the tarot. So this deck is very special to me. I could buy another copy of this, and it won't be as special as this actual deck that I'm holding in my hands. It's a little bit browned from use all these years. You can see it's a little browned, which I love, because that's a testament to the time that this thing has been through with me. And yeah, so that is pretty much my tarot story of how it got started. Since then, I have collected several more tarot decks. As I said before, I have about 24 decks or so. But yeah, I will show you more decks, of course, in the future. But I just really wanted to get you into the know of what my tarot journey was and how it started and how long I've been doing this. For 13 years, that's half my life. And I still don't consider myself to be an expert. There's always something new to learn. And yeah, so about to hit the 20-minute mark on this video, combined with the first video that I made that'll end up being about half an hour altogether. But I hope you enjoyed this. I would love to hear your tarot stories of how your journey started, and in future videos I will let you know how my study of the tarot and my belief in the tarot has evolved over the years, as my mindset as a teenager is very different from what it is now. Things have changed, but my respect and my love for tarot has not changed at all, despite the fact that some other beliefs have changed. I used to be very, very spiritual as a child. I never really connected with any major religion until I encountered Wicca, and I was a Wiccan for quite a while, probably up until I was, I would say, yeah, about 23 or 23. But we'll get into that more later. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, comment, tell me if there are any things I need to improve on besides running out of space on my iPad. And yeah, I appreciate you watching this. Thanks, you guys.